If you look closely at the faces of the generals standing behind Donald Trump this morning, you don't see confidence, you see dread. You see men who know they are watching a blunder that cannot be undone with a press release. Because what happened today wasn't just a diplomatic stumble. It wasn't a trade argument over wheat or timber. It wasn't even about the boundary. Today, the President of the United States looked at the country that has stood alongside America in every major conflict for over a century, and he told them they were finished. But he didn't stop at the policy. If he had just scrapped an agreement, we could call it politics as usual. But Trump had to make it personal. He had to make it ugly. In a tirade that is already being deleted from conservative media pages, Donald Trump didn't just attack Canada's finances, he attacked their fallen. He disrespected via 157 dead soldiers, men and women who died wearing a maple leaf on their uniform but serving under American commanders. Soldiers who bled into the dirt of Kandahar so that American soldiers could return home. And when the news reached Ottawa, something shifted. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, didn't shout. He didn't rage. He didn't go on camera and throw insults. He simply walked to a podium, adjusted the microphone, and read a single name from a piece of paper. And in that moment, the foundational partnership between the United States and Canada collapsed. In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to take you inside the room where it happened. I'm going to show you the leaked Pentagon documents that prove the US military is scrambling right now. I'm going to show you exactly how Canada, quiet, patient Canada, just wrapped its hand around the throat of the American energy supply. And I'm going to tell you why, for the first time in history, the United States is standing alone in North America. Buckle up, because the world just shifted. Let's go back to 8 a.m. this morning. It started with a question that should have been routine. A journalist from a wire service asked Trump about the stalled conversations on the Arctic security budget. It's a dry subject. It's usually about icebreakers and radar installations. But Trump was already irritated. Sources say he had just walked out of a briefing where his advisors told him he needed Canada. They told him the Northern Corridor was exposed. And you know how Trump reacts when he's told he needs somebody. He turns on them. So he walks out to the chopper and he erupts. He says Canada is a liability. They are freeloaders. I'm pulling their Tier 1 clearance. They are out of the room. That was shock number one. Tier 1 clearance is the highest level of trust in the Western Alliance. It's what lets a Canadian general sit in Colorado Springs at NORAD and assess whether a nuclear missile is on its way. It's the 2 eyes of the 5 eyes agreement. Trump just shut one of those eyes, but then the reporter pushed back. She said, "Mr. President, Canada invoked Article 5 after 9/11. They went to war alongside us. 158 of them perished in Afghanistan. Doesn't that mean anything?" And this is the moment that history will remember. Trump laughed. You can see it in the video. He smirks, waves his hand dismissively, and says, "They didn't fight for us. They showed up for a participation trophy." I checked the numbers. 457 guys. That's a rough weekend in Chicago. We don't owe them for poor judgment. It was a terrible arrangement. He called 457 fallen soldiers a terrible arrangement. He called the sacrifice of an entire nation a participation trophy. He wasn't debating tariffs. He was dismissing blood. Now picture yourself as a Canadian mother in Saskatchewan who lost her son in 2008 in a roadside explosion meant for a US convoy. You are watching your screen, and the commander-in-chief of the alliance is laughing at your son's death. The reaction in Ottawa wasn't political. It was visceral. Within 10 minutes, the hashtag number 4457 was trending everywhere. But it wasn't just accounts. It was photographs. Thousands of photographs of Canadian soldiers carrying American soldiers. Photos of coffins wrapped in flags moving down the highway of heroes. And inside the White House, the phones started ringing. And they haven't stopped. While social media was erupting, a different kind of eruption was happening at the Pentagon. You need to understand something that Trump doesn't. Geography is not a bargaining chip. The United States has a massive gaping weakness. It's called the North. If Russia or China ever decides to launch a strike, nuclear, hypersonic, or conventional, it travels over the North Pole. It crosses over the Arctic. And whose territory does it pass through before reaching America? Canada. For 60 years, the US has depended on a network of radar installations, listening outposts, and forward operating bases positioned deep in the Canadian Arctic. This is the North Warning System. When Trump said, "Get them out of the room," he didn't just wound feelings, he triggered a structural collapse. We have obtained a leaked document circulating among the Joint Chiefs of Staff this afternoon. The subject line reads simply, "Operational Blackout, Northern Sector." The memo warns that if Canada responds by cutting US access to these northern sites, the United States loses 40% of its early warning capability. 40%. That means if a hypersonic missile is launched, we detect it 15 minutes later than we normally would. In a nuclear exchange, 15 minutes is the difference between stopping the missile and losing New York City. Trump believes he holds all the power because America has the arsenal, but Canada holds the radar, and you can't fire at what you cannot see. By midday today, reports confirmed that Canadian officers at NORAD headquarters in Colorado were collecting their belongings. These are men and women who have worked side by side with Americans for decades. One U.S. Air Force colonel speaking without attribution told a journalist, "It felt like a split where the husband throws out the wife but forgets she has the keys to the house. We are locked out of our own security network." This is the disorder Trump created. He traded national safety for a headline, and while he was boasting about strength, the Russian Air Force was undoubtedly watching, making notes, and getting ready to probe exactly how blind we just became. Now let's look at the other side of the board. Mark Carney is not a political figure in the way Trump is a political figure. Trump is a marketing specialist. Carney is a central banker. Trump deals in drama. Carney deals in exposure. Carney ran the Bank of England. He ran the Bank of Canada. He studies economies for a profession. He knows precisely where the pressure points are. When the story of the insult broke, everyone expected Carney to explode. Everyone anticipated a passionate address about national pride. Instead, he traveled to the War Museum in Ottawa. He stood in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier. He didn't mention Trump's name. He didn't reference the trade dispute. He simply said to the families of the 457, "Your sacrifice secured the freedom of two nations. If our neighbor has forgotten the cost of that freedom, then we must remind them of its worth." And then he dropped the hammer. Carney announced Operation Sovereign North. It sounds like a military exercise. It isn't. It's an economic stranglehold. The energy audit. Effective immediately, the Canadian government has launched a national security review of all energy exports headed for the United States. Carney used the exact same legal framing Trump uses. He said, "We need to verify our energy is not sustaining a hostile foreign entity." Let's break that down for you. Quebec supplies the electricity that keeps New York City and Boston running. Alberta provides the heavy crude oil that refineries in Texas require to operate. U.S. refineries are designed for heavy oil. They cannot process the light oil Texas produces on its own. They need Canadian crude. Carney didn't shut off the pipeline. That would be a declaration of war. He simply tightened the valve. He ordered inspections, environmental assessments, pipeline safety checks. Within 1 hour of Carney's announcement, the flow of oil into the Midwest fell by 15%. The spot price of electricity in New England surged 400%. Carney is showing Trump the contrast between loud power and actual power. Trump shouts on social media. Carney quietly reaches into your home and dims the lights. He is betting that the American public, and specifically the American donors who fund Trump's campaigns, will feel the damage in their wallets long before Canada feels the sting of the insult. Economic pain is one thing, but Trump has forfeited something today that money cannot restore. He lost the warrior class. Check your feed. It's not just progressives who are enraged. It's Marines. It's Green Berets. It's the men who have "Don't Tread on Me" decals on their vehicles. They are livid. Why? Because when you are in a firefight in the Arganda Valley, nobody stops to ask if you are Canadian or American. You just bleed the same color. We found a clip from a former U.S. Army sniper that is spreading rapidly right now. He's seated in his truck, holding a photograph of himself alongside a Canadian unit. He says, "Mr. President, in 2010, I was pinned down. I was out of ammunition. The men who pulled me out were the Royal Canadian Regiment. They lost a soldier that day, saving my life. You just spit on his grave. You don't represent me anymore." This is the development that horrifies the White House. The Pentagon isn't just an institution. It's a code of ethics. And that code is constructed on honor. By mocking the dead of an ally, Trump has broken the values of the very people he expects to follow his orders. We are hearing accounts of departures at the State Department. We are hearing about organized absences among Border Patrol agents who refuse to harass Canadian travelers. Trump is now waging a battle on two fronts, one against Mark Carney and one against the conscience of his own armed forces. While Washington and Ottawa are at odds, do you know who is celebrating? Moscow and Beijing. For 2 decades, Russia has been attempting to fracture the North American partnership. They have sent operatives. They have launched cyber intrusions. They have run disinformation campaigns. But they never broke through. The connection was too deep. Today, Donald Trump accomplished for Vladimir Putin what Putin could never manage on his own. He shattered the shield. The Russian bomber flight. Just 2 hours ago, NORAD, now operating in disarray, detected 4 Russian Bear bombers approaching the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. Under normal circumstances, US and Canadian jets would launch together to intercept them. It's a practiced routine. They do it every month. But today, confusion. Who takes off? Are the Canadians cleared to share the tracking data? Is the encrypted connection working? The bombers turned around before crossing into airspace, but the signal was unmistakable. Russia was checking the lock, and they discovered it was open. Meanwhile, China just issued a statement. It was brief and diplomatic. It invited Prime Minister Carney to Beijing next week to talk about stability and rare earth resources. This is the worst-case scenario. If Canada pulls away from the US, they don't simply vanish. They move towards someone else. Canada holds the uranium. Canada holds the lithium. Canada holds the fresh water. If Carney concludes that the US is an unreliable ally, and he signs an economic agreement with Europe or Asia to replace the American market, the US forfeits its resource reserve. Trump believes he is cornering Canada. In reality, he is cornering America. He is transforming Fortress North America into a structure divided against itself. You might be sitting there thinking, I don't follow geopolitics, I just want fuel costs to stay manageable. Well, I have difficult news for you. The US economy is an engine. Canada is the lubricant. You don't notice the lubricant until it runs dry and the engine stalls. Here is what unfolds in the next 72 hours if this isn't resolved. First, the auto industry. A vehicle assembled in Detroit crosses the border 7 times before it is complete. Components travel back and forth. If the border slows because of security screenings, the plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee go dark. Ford and GM have already distributed internal warnings about critical supply chain disruption. Second, the food supply. Canada is the largest destination for American agricultural products. If Carney decides to place a retaliatory duty on American dairy, grain, or cattle, or if he simply discovers safety concerns to hold them back, American growers lose billions instantly. Third, inflation. We are already battling rising costs. Now imagine if the price of timber, aluminum, and fuel climbs 20% because Trump needed to make a statement. This isn't just a political debate. This is an attack on your household. Every time Trump humiliates an ally, the risk of being an American partner goes up. Businesses pull back investment. Deals get abandoned. The world begins searching for substitutes for the dollar. Carney understands this. That's why he appears unruffled. He knows that economics always outlasts rhetoric. He is waiting for the American stock market to force Trump's hand. So where does this conclude? The clock is running. Scenario A, the reversal. Unlikely. Trump's inner circle persuades him that the market slide is damaging his approval numbers. He posts a message saying he respects the Canadian people, but governments need to contribute fairly. He quietly reinstates the Tier 1 status late on a Friday night. The harm is real, but the crisis is contained. Probability 20%. Trump despises acknowledging errors. Scenario B, the escalation. Probable. Trump observes the backlash and doubles down. He blames Carney of meddling in US domestic matters by squeezing the energy corridor. He declares a national emergency at the northern crossing. He dispatches personnel to the border checkpoints. This is the point where the unguarded border becomes a fortified line. Commerce halts. The contraction begins at once. Probability 50%. This follows Trump's history. Scenario C, the fracture, the dangerous new reality. Carney determines that the US is a failing power. He accelerates the separation. Canada builds deeper connections with the EU and the Pacific. The US becomes an island, embittered, disconnected, and encircled by former partners who no longer trust its commitments. The Arctic turns into a contested frontier. The NORAD partnership formally ends, probability 30%, and climbing every hour. History is full of alliances that crumbled, Rome and its provinces, Britain and its territories, but they typically dissolve over territory or wealth or ideology. It is rare, genuinely rare, for a partnership to end because of pure, deliberate contempt. Donald Trump wanted to appear dominant today. He wanted to signal to the world that he is indebted to no one. But in doing so, he exposed precisely what he is. He is a man who looks at a grave and sees a bad transaction. He is a man who looks at an ally and sees a vulnerability. Mark Carney didn't need to win this confrontation with rhetoric. He didn't need to raise his voice. He simply had to stand beside the truth. The truth is that 457 Canadians didn't die for a participation trophy. They died for us. They died for you. And today, for the first time in our shared story, we didn't say thank you. We said get out. If you are watching this and you feel that hollow ache in your chest, that sensation that something irreplaceable has been shattered, you are correct. The map didn't shift today. The character of the country did. I want to hear from you, especially if you served. Is this alliance worth preserving, or has Trump finally crossed the line for good? Do you stand with the 457, or do you stand with the insult? Leave it in the comments. I'll be reading every one. And subscribe, because tomorrow is going to be even harder. This is history.